speaker is one who was actually made it into Parliament in Ireland. Clare Daly is a Socialist Party TD, Chop the Dála. That's a member of the Parliament for Dublin North. She was elected in 2011 as part of the United Left Alliance, an electoral alliance initiated by the Socialist Party in Ireland. But be in no doubt, Clare has nothing to do with the liars, thieves and careerists that mainly populate our Parliament. Alongside being a lifelong trade union organiser, she also went to prison for refusing to pay bin charges as part of a mass movement a few years ago. And if I remember correctly, in the theme of this evening, Clare's maiden speech this year, she called for a programme of job creation. Please welcome Clare Daly.
Talk about a world in crisis, I don't think you have to look too far away across the water. It tells its own tale. The last time I was over here in 2004, we were in the middle of the Celtic Tiger, where we were supposed to be living the dream, and our Taoiseach Bertie Ahern told the Socialist Party's Joe Higgins to stop talking it down, stop trying to spoil the party and go off and commit suicide. That we should really accept that we were living in an economic miracle. Well, of course, now the reality has hit home and is firmly exposed. What it was no miracle, but nothing more than a glorified gambling trick, profiteering and speculation on the property market, which fueled a bubble which has now come crashing to a catastrophic end, with 45% of the value of property being wiped out, leaving hundreds of thousands of homeowners shackled to 30 and 40-year mortgages, debts of thousands of euros every month, where they couldn't even sell the property for a fraction of the mortgage, even if there was somebody mad enough to want to buy it. They couldn't even cover the cost of the mortgage if they moved out and asked somebody to rent it. Where recent studies revealed that 8% of the Irish population, or 280,000 people, do not have enough income on a monthly basis to meet their essential bills. 12% of the population have no money after they pay their essential bills, and a whopping 25% of the Irish population have less than 70 euros every month after they meet their essential bills. Yet it is these people, the victims of the economic crisis, who are shouldering the costs of the debts of the developers and the speculators who fueled the crisis in the first place. A mere 180 of these SPIDs accumulated debts of 62 billion euros, debts which were then written off and discounted by an average of 58%, and that burden transferred onto the shoulder of the taxpayers, a sum of 36 billion euros in bank recapitalisation put onto our shoulders. And these private debts are being paid by a vicious austerity regime and massive cutbacks. We, probably like yourselves, are constantly told that we're living in an economic crisis, that the country is broke, they can't spend what they don't have. Yet they had no problem in spending 715 million euros last Wednesday to unsecured bondholders in Anglo-Irish Bank. Individuals who the Taoiseach said he didn't even know who they were, but who it's been estimated have between them access to funds worth 21 trillion euros. That's 100 times the size of Ireland's GDP at the height of the boom years. You know, if you really wanted an idea of the madness of capitalism or the nature of the upside-down world that we live in, surely this is it. We're expected to believe that if we hadn't paid those debts, it would cause a catastrophic situation in the Irish economy. Obviously, that's an absolutely ridiculous assertion. It's not inevitable at all. It's just capitalism. A system designed and organised to exploit the majority of people in the interests of a few. And one of the purposes of this rally is to say that in actual fact, that's not inevitable and it's not logical at all. In fact, it is an obscenity, where in an Irish context you have 3.6 billion euros to be handed over to unsecured bondholders, an amount roughly equal to the austerity that is going to be unleashed next month in the budget. As I left the airport today, all of the newspaper headlines were 3.8 billion in cutbacks. The average family to take an extra €600 every year in extra taxation, and that's only to begin with. And what we have is a continuation of the policies that have seen hundreds of people on hospital trolleys as accident and emergency units are shut down and small hospitals are closed. We have an unbelievable scenario when the one and only paediatric rheumatologist consultant in the country who deals with children who suffer with acute pain is going on maternity leave. And they can't replace her because there's a recruitment embargo in the public sector, condemning thousands of children to excruciating pain. Where hundreds of children have had access to special needs assistance and educational opportunity removed. We've had austerity for 3 years now, and it hasn't worked. In actual fact, it's made the situation worse, with €20 billion taken out of the economy, fueling a situation where unemployment has quadrupled, and there are now almost 500,000 people unemployed in the south of Ireland. An equivalent figure for here would be 7.5 million people unemployed. That's the scale of the crisis in Ireland from the high points that Bertie Ahern talked about. And a little bit like the insane that Einstein, the definition of insanity that Einstein referred to. Our political establishment are hell-bent on doing the same thing over and over again, hoping that they'll get a different result. Well, they're not going to get a different result. Their policies are actually sucking the lifeblood out of the economy in a way similar to other people around Europe, most particularly the situation in Greece. And we can say, and it's obvious now to everybody, that European capitalism is in crisis. We've had 20 summits over the past 18 months to deal with the debt crisis, the so-called bailouts. They're not bailouts, they're extortion rackets, loans at massive interest to pay the debts of private speculators. We've had Ireland, we've had Portugal, then we've had Greece again. And every time they tell us that they've got a solution, they've made their breakthrough and the problems are solved for capitalism. We were told that during the summer when they expanded the European Financial Stability Fund to 440 billion. But no sooner had they announced it than the markets went into turmoil over the situation in Spain and in Italy. We saw it this week with Italy having to bow down in front of the hierarchy and sign over its programme to be monitored. We saw it with the pandemonium over the referendum in Greece and Papandreou's announcement. We see these so-called advocates of democracy showing their true colours when they made it clear that the great unwashed of Greece, no more than anywhere else, shouldn't have a say on these issues that dictate their lives. And what we're facing throughout Europe in reality is an absolute and utter crisis of capitalism. The ruling elite in Greece know that they're not going to get the money back because it's simply unsustainable that the Greek population could shoulder this level of debt. That's why they've had the level of write-off that they have, but they're still creaking under the burden of austerity. Capitalism is not capable of offering a way forward, and the time and the task posed in front of us is to organise to build a new order, not just in Europe, but throughout the world. Ordinary people, like the Jarrow Marches and the young people in this country, have no alternative but to begin to organise. We saw that in Greece, with the magnificent struggles, the 48-hour general strike, the big movements in Athens. In Ireland, we haven't had that level of struggle yet. I think people initially used the election to cast their revenge. They called it a revolution through the ballot box, where they absolutely routed the ruling party that existed in the south for many, many decades and kicked them out with a vengeance in the hope that things would get better. Of course, already now, 6 months down the road, that hope has been found to be misplaced. And we saw it with the outcome of the Dublin West by-election, where the Socialist Party achieved a magnificent result in that election, and we saw the beginnings of a fall-off in support for the government parties. And, you know, it is really true, the beginning of struggle that's beginning to take place in the south of Ireland around hospitals, around education issues and so on. It's through that struggle that people are beginning to realise that you can't just combat the effects of the present system. That's just not not good enough. You've got to tackle the root of the system itself. The madness where 1% of the population controls 35% of the wealth. The madness in Ireland where hundreds of thousands of properties lie empty and idle, owned by the taxpayer because we took over the developers' bills, yet 100,000 people are on waiting lists for council housing. The madness of the retirement age being raised to 70 years of age when there are countless young people without a job and ruined on the dole. The madness of where billions of euros are being used to pay bondholders and not being invested to create secure employment. That's the dead end of capitalism in Ireland and internationally. 100 years ago, the great Irish socialist James Connolly said, "The day has passed for patching up the capitalist system. It must go." The task of that overthrow has been abandoned by the Labour Party and by the leaders of the trade unions. But it is out of the present economic crisis that a new leadership is being built. And the last point I'll make is, before I got elected to the Dáil, I worked for Aer Lingus, which is the national airline in Ireland. And I was coming over on the plane today, and I met some of my former colleagues who were working on the flight. And they were updating me about what was going on in the company, and like everywhere else, the race to the bottom and the drive down of conditions. And the chief steward made the point to me, and he said, you know, they think they can push us around because they've done it before and we've rolled over. Well, there comes a point when you don't roll over anymore and you make a stand. That day is coming. The message from this rally, from our party in Ireland and our international, is that we are engaged in that day. It's fast approaching. The struggle for a better world is on, and we are privileged to be a part of it.